Aloha, friends. Aloha, Sacred Return community. Let's see, get these in. Happy Thursday, 21st of January, 2021. There are a lots of ones and twos if you're in numerology. What is that? 01, 21, 2021. Lots of new beginnings. Lots of coming together, the number 2. I just personally came back from an acupuncture appointment. It's the first time I've had acupuncture in many, many months. Having someone else administer it. It's not recommended that you needle yourself as an acupuncturist, but you know, we do it. Let's be honest, we all do it if you're an acupuncturist. So it was nice to have someone else's perspective. So feeling really grounded, almost feeling like I don't want to talk, and at the same time really inspired to share. So today's chai chat, welcome to Chai Chat Thursdays. In my cup, my nice warm cup, is actually tea, and it's a pu'er. I don't know how many of you are familiar with pu'er, but it's like a deep roasted, I actually don't know if it's a black tea or a green tea because it's roasted. It has a really mild, nutty flavor, but this was the tea I was introduced to the first time I traveled in Nepal it was actually at the change of the millennium, 1999 through the New Year's to 2000. I was in the middle somewhere in the Himalayas, and for the millennium change, we were doing an environmental cleanup along the route on the way to base camp. I was in college, and pu'er was the type of tea we got served every morning and mid-morning for our breaks with our group that we were with. And so in my heart, it's just an incredible sense of remembering. And I found pu'er here at a local Asian food mart, and I was super excited. So I've been pretty much feasting on that for few days, and I want to know what's in your cup as always. I want to take this opportunity to, again, always express my gratitude. How do I put this into words? It's really easy for me to move into like this very young, expressive, inspired cheerleader for yoga teachers, because I truly do see there's something with people who are drawn towards this path. And whether you jump fully into yoga, in the philosophy and the history, which is where most of the practice is grounded in, or if you're drawn to it for the physical practice that brings you back into your body, there's something within you that said yes, that wanted to continue learning more. It's what brought us all together. And I really don't see that as a coincidence. There's a character within all the people I've ever worked with. It's almost like the archetypical, and I don't even know all the archetypes. This is my interpretation. There's like the archetype of the healer that wants to be rebirthed or brought more to the forefront or to be explored in some way. And so this is an element within everyone who comes to yoga of reducing suffering. Whether that's at the physical layers, mental, emotional layers, spiritual layers, from our traumas, people drawn to this path with practice, and they continue to practice, you're going to notice that you're drawn into this stream of consciousness, which is really about reducing suffering. Now, that's a term often used in like a lot of Buddhist teaching and a lot of Buddhism. But let's remember, Buddha was a yogi. You know, he studied, she, let's remove gender from this, but studied in the same path of yamas and niyamas, and to be able to sit with oneself with ease. And an element of being able to disconnect from your birth and your stories that everyone told you needed to fit into, and to sit with oneself long enough to unveil and unravel and to hear one's own heart song and purpose and resonance, whether you call that energy or vibration, with the universe. I see this thread through everyone who comes to a yoga teacher training or into Ayurveda or into Chinese medicine. And I see that, I think, it could be my own bias. Let me be very clear. That could be my own bias, because this is also what I have watched in myself in this unfolding or unraveling or threading back together. Just all the different ways you see it. I really wanted to share a piece of Asian medicine wisdom for those of you who were there at the course and the class. It was so great to spend that time with you. For those of you who didn't get the full course and want to go back and listen, remember you have that, you have your discount code, you can use it. The recording and the handouts for the class are still on my website. I'll take that down in mid-February. So you have about 3 more weeks before that gets pulled down. But let me just share you some tidbits about where we are energetically. Remember that both Ayurveda and Chinese medicine come from, it's an energetic medicine. It's a medicine about timing. It's a medicine about a reflection of the resonance of the universe and of Earth, right? So if Earth is a microcosm of the whole universe, right, then Earth also becomes a macrocosm for us, and we become the microcosm. And so resonance or vibration is inseparable, except that we have forgotten that. And we have done a really good job as human beings through our mind being distracted from that resonance, distracted from that connection. In Asian medicine, Chinese medicine, and Ayurveda, that is at the heart. That is its fundamental principles of how any of the modalities used within these two lineages of ancient wisdom tradition and complete systems of medicine work. They come back to that resonance. And how are we resonating with, how are we allowing that resonance to flow through us? Or do we block it? Or do we stuff it? Or do we hoard it? How does this resonance, how does this flow of chi or prana move through us in a particular way, given your particular form? And yes, this definitely can get into an astrological perspective, but we can see the whole within the whole, right? We can see everything as everything through the reflections of nature. And so wherever you are on the planet, whether you're in the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere, if you're in the northern hemisphere, we call this time period winter, right? If you're in the southern hemisphere, you're calling this time period summer. But this is the example of, it doesn't matter where you are on the planet. We need to be able to tune into that resonance. We need to, and tune in doesn't mean like, yes, it can literally mean to sit there with oneself in meditation. That is actually considered to be the spiritual way of tuning into the most subtle vibrations of the time and place. But it also can mean simply tuning in with our senses. Right? So with our eyes, what do we see in nature? Are the leaves still on the trees, or are they falling off? Have they been off for many, many weeks? And there's this almost like dryness to everything around. Look with your senses. What do you smell? Does it smell wet? Does it smell dry and crisp? Does it smell kind of decaying? Like, do you really get a sense of the smell of the decay of the leaves? Are they still in that decaying process? Or has that process completed itself? And so now there's almost like a mustiness in the air. What are the tastes? What are the natural foods that are growing in your local area? Not the ones imported from around the world. That's another way we've actually really disconnected from the resonance of our foods. It's a beautiful thing that we have food distribution that can get to any place pretty much at any time. Now, the politics will leave out of if that's happening or not. But we also have created a false sense of season in our taste because we can get whatever we want whenever we want. So we continue to feed ourselves the things that we want from the mind rather than what is growing and what nature is reminding us is going to nourish us at this time of year. So part of this, when we tune back in, sometimes we need to tune back in with the mind in terms of researching, reminding ourselves, oh, like I need to go and actually look up what is growing right now in Michigan, in this environment. I do that. That's part of what I do when we move to a place, is to learn the climate zone and to learn the season and what's growing. Well, nothing's really growing. I mean, winter kale's growing, winter squash is growing. There's a lot of farm animals around, right? So if I were to live off of what is available right now, it would look very hearty in terms of meat, eggs, bone broths, winter squash, winter kale in terms of my green, right? It'd be really mineral rich because bone broths and meats are full of minerals, right? But it's not going to look as light and airy. Oh, and it might include dry beans or dry foods that I harvested at the end of summer, right? Or grains that will now carry me through the winter months, right? So a lot of grains that can be stored, or dried beans that can be stored. That might be added to my diet. That's really how I try to cook in the winter, right? We can have, if you have any questions about vegetarianism, veganism, and yoga and ahimsa, we can definitely have that conversation. This is coming more from a place of medicine rather than the aesthetic practices of yoga. So I'm talking more I'm talking more Ayurveda and Chinese medicine right now. I definitely believe there's a time and a place, and everybody's constitution. And remember, part of the definition of health is also your mental peace. So if eating certain foods actually is an internal repulsion in the resonance from your heart and your gut is like, not for me, then please listen to that. Now compare that to if your mind is giving you reasons not to do something and you're trying to force a habit or force a pattern that really isn't settled into the resonance of your being yet. There's going to be a lot of disconnect and a lot of forcing of yourself trying to create a new habit, right? Time and a place. We need to create discipline in our lives, yes. We need to have routine. The body loves routine, just like the rising of the sun, setting of the sun. But also there's this element of force. And if we force so much that we create stress in our lives, or we force so much that we're suppressing a part of our nature, a part of nature that is asking for something, then we actually can be creating dissonance or disharmony with that resonance. So again, this is why it's in an individual path, not necessarily, you know, I can say one thing and it means for all people. So that's, I've really changed how I've shared this information through the years, because I used to just spout out like, oh, for winter do this, da 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 da. For fall do this, da 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 da. But it's way more nuanced than that, and that takes a lot of the empowering aspect out of these medicines from you to tune back into what's going on. I don't want you to necessarily see me as an authority or just trust what I say. I want you to hone in your senses to what your environment is going on in that moment, what's going on in your environment, and notice if there's a reflection of that mirror, mirror reflection happening within. Right? So let's tune in our sound. What are the sounds? Is it super active, super boisterous in nature? Do you hear a lot of the wind in the trees? Is a lot of leaves blowing? Are the birds chirping all the time? Is the water rushing through if you were to get out in nature? Obviously, some of us live in like urban jungles where the sound is of cars beeping. But if you took yourself out in nature, nature is medicine. Like going out in nature is one of the greatest medicines I think we can prescribe to ourselves more than ever. It's that disconnect, right? It helps us. It's that natural, if you believe in EMF or not, like regardless, it is a way to completely recharge your system from the overstimulus of screens, is to just get out in nature and to recharge, retune your senses to, the nature's colors and the prana and the chi of nature. So that's what I mean when I say tune into your winter, right? The winter wisdom is already there. It's showing you everything you need to know right in front of you. It's just sometimes we need to be reminded of that, right? Because we all are here for a quick fix. Let's not sugarcoat that in any way. I still catch myself all the time being like, but just tell me, like, especially with my teachers, I just want to know the answer, right? Like, just tell me what formula, right? But there is such an element of the not knowing as part of the process of really opening yourself to the chi or the prana in order to feel your own resonance and notice how that resonance is interacting with others. I just realized this can sound completely crazy. And at the same time, like, this is that subtle aspect of the body, right? We have the physical layer, we can see, we can touch. And then there's that other aspect of the human experience, which we can't touch. And in fact, much of the human experience we can't touch: the mind, the emotions, the resonance. And I'm not making this up. Like, this is physics, really, right? I was so happy when Laura Plum reminded me that, you know, so much of Ayurveda and Chinese medicine is essentially, you know, we call it physics these days, but back then they would have called it Ayurveda, or back then they would have called it Chinese medicine. It was just the laws of nature in application into our lives. That's physics. That's exactly what Ayurveda is. That is exactly what Chinese medicine is. So I want you to tune into what's going on. And then again, remember, we apply opposite qualities in order to bring balance if balance is needed, right? So things can start getting very heavy. I'm going to wrap this up, but things can start feeling really stagnant for some of us in the Northern Hemisphere if it's been cold for a long time, if there hasn't been a lot of stimulus to the senses for a long time. That's why right now, winter in Chinese medicine, there's a saying that finding stillness in water is winter. Finding stillness in water is winter. When your senses don't have so much to tune into and to adapt to and adjust to, there's really this great equalizer in our seasons called winter, when everything goes dormant, goes really, really deep inward to re-nourish, to replenish, to revitalize. Think of like the lily bulbs. Think of all the bulbs that you plant in a garden, right? They're like sitting in the winter soil. They're sitting in the earth's energy, just soaking up, waiting for that time when the sun and the heat begin to happen. And then they're going to grow through the surface. So that's our time. This is the time where we can really go inward, and it's okay to feel stagnant. I mean, think about, is that stagnation asking you to move inward for rest and rejuvenation because you just burn the candle at both ends, and that's your habit and your cycle and your pattern. Now, if we get too stagnant, right, we need to remember that one of the balancing properties of winter is things are naturally going to get cooler. So we want to bring an element of warmth to our day. Our foods are cooked, mostly warm foods during the winter time or during colder times. Now, again, I'm not telling you what to eat, but warmer foods are really important in the winter time. As the body goes inward, as Earth moves inward to this rest and rejuvenation, the digestive system isn't as active, right? If we think about the sun being that mirror reflection to our digestive energy, it's just not out as much in the winter time, right? So our digestion is the same. It's not as active as much. It wants a more inward experience. So that warmth of our food really helps benefit our digestive system and almost like pre-cooking the food. So it's easier for our own bodies to digest and assimilate. We want the warmth of the things that make us feel cozy. Like I think about, for me, the idea of reading a book with a blankie around me, my favorite cup of tea or chai at the time, and a great book, like philosophical book that's all about moving inward, to me is my visual representation of winter. And many of my days look like that. I mean, I don't necessarily have the fire. I wish we did. This house doesn't have one. But the warm tea, the bundling up, right? Even if you're around the house. This is not a great time to necessarily be starting your New Year's resolution unless your New Year's resolution is to meditate more. This is a great time to really hunker down into your meditation practice and make that a regular thing so that when spring comes, it's part of your routine. So I just wanted to share that with you. I want to keep these to about 20 minutes. I hope you find something in there that really speaks to your own resonance right now and to where you are. You know, we're all just these amazing vessels of being with spirit moving through us. And I hope that our time together gives you a sense of feeling that connection with your spirit and your vessel and your divine sacredness. From my heart to yours, I hope you have a beautiful day and a beautiful weekend.